everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba for this show. We've got a very special guest on this episode, Örebro manager Axel Kjäll, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his interview that he did with Jonathan very recently. But first of all, let's welcome my friend onto the show, Mr. Fadugba. How's things going?
Hi, Steve, and hi, everyone. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Doing well. We're in quarantine here as usual, although we're about to end the lockdown. And yeah, I'm getting a bit of a quarantine moustache, quarantine afro. It's all, there's hair everywhere at the moment, a bit like you, Steve, eh?
Yeah, I've got this bit of this gruff look going on, but, the missus seems to like it, so that'll do me. So we've got a bit of analysis beforehand. We were asked on Twitter a few weeks ago, actually, to cover a couple of players. Now, so I've got one from Norway, a new signing that's gone in there, and you've got one in Sweden to talk about as well. So, a bit of quickfire analysis before we move on to the interview.
Yeah, we've been asked. We put the word out there for our listeners. We've said, given our partnership with Y-Scout this season, been renewed for another year, which is great to be part of. Y-Scout, the leading platform for video analysis. We asked our followers if they want an analysis of any new signings. So we said we're going to take a statistical look at some new signings and players in Sweden and Norway on our next show. Any requests? And we've had quite a few requests, haven't we? But we've had one from Sweden, one from Norway that we've picked out. Steve, you're going to go first. We've got 5 minutes each, roughly. And the player that you have is from @Vigard Bjorga, I believe. So I will let you take it away on this analysis, introduce the player, and who's asked the question, of course.
Yeah, this is the question from @Vigard Bjorga, a Strømsgodset Godset fan. Thanks very much for this. He's interested in hearing about Janis Ikaunieks from a Latvian international who they've signed in the off-season from Liepāja, a Latvian side there. I don't know much about them, I must say, but this player does have an interesting history. He had a spell in France with FC Metz. A bit of a mysterious spell, actually. A bit more on that later, but he's been around the block a bit. The last 2 or 3 years in Latvia on loan from Metz, and then he signed for Liepāja. So basically we've got I would call him a versatile attacker, but a winger mostly, with a very strong left foot. So which means, on the left-hand side there, he's going to be a traditional winger, but he's also equally adept on the right-hand side as an inside forward, inverted winger, whatever you want to call it. He can do other positions as well. I would say a big strength of this player is his technical skills, flair. That is a word that comes to mind when you think about Ikaunieks. Good balance, good technique, good vision, things like that. And he's done really well in the last couple of years in the Latvian league. 2018, for example, he had a really high decent dribbling success rate. He seems to have a high expected goal figure in comparison to his position. For example, 2018, 0.55 expected goals per game and 0.32 expected goals per game in 2019. He didn't actually always live up to those targets, which is a concern, I must say. That his finishing, I think, is a weakness for this player. But he's not going to be playing as a striker too often, although he will get chances. I think it's a real positive that he's getting high expected goal figures. He must be getting in the right sort of positions, I do like that in a player. We've had this debate before, haven't we? What is it good to be sort of well above your expected goals, or is it actually good to be getting those figures of the chances anyway? And I think we've got to look as a positive in that regard. Like I say, he's got a very strong left foot, and that I've noticed. I've been watching some of his video clips on Y-Scout. Too many times he tries to take the finish with his left foot instead of his right. A bit like a Savo Milosevic used to be for Aston Villa, if you remember him, like seriously one-footed. He's not saying he can't do things with his right, but he does have a strong tendency to want to do it with his left peg, which is it's a good and a bad thing, isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah.
Have conceded 54 goals last season and finished in the bottom 5, finished 11th, I believe. Do they need this sort of player, and where do you see him fitting in? Is he going to be a regular starter? Will he start on the bench, or what's the outlook for him from that point of view? Where's he going to fit into this side?
I have to say, I think it's a really good signing in terms of positionally, because they under Henrik Pedersen were using a 4-3-3 formation back end of last season. So you basically, in the 3 up front, you've got a striker, a left winger and a right winger, and those left and right wingers sort of interchange a bit, sometimes in the traditional winger role, sometimes cutting inside. He can basically play in all 3 of those positions, even striker if he wanted him to. So he fits into that formation perfectly well, and that's a big part of signing someone in that regard. So I have to take my hat off to them in that regard. Little bit concerned. He can be. He's not the most physical of players, as a lot of wingers aren't, of course. Strength and that. And we know that the Norwegian league, there can be a few bullies around, can't they? So I could see. I think you could. If it was me, I'd be crunching into him with a few strong tackles, going hard and see what he's made of. In that respect, so that's a little bit concerning. But he's got the technical ability and the flair to sort of evade these sort of tackles and things, and he's got decent pace as well. But he's got good vision, which is good. I think they're going to be. He will come into the team on that left or right wing, I think, Jonathan.
Yeah, and he's played 12 games for Metz as well. He's played in the French league between 2015 and 2018. Started his career at Liepāja Metallurgs, moved to Liepāja. Had 2 spells there, 32 games in his first spell, 41 games in his second spell, and has 26 caps for Latvia with 3 goals. So it could be an interesting one. Is he the sort of player you'd probably put in your Eliteserien fantasy team? Is he going to be creative? Is he going to weigh in with those assists? What's your verdict on that?
I think he will be one to watch for fantasy football, but definitely a new player coming in. And if he plays like he did in the Latvian league, then he'll go very well. He'll be a goal-scoring threat and an assist threat. He does take set pieces as well, and he's good from the penalty spot. Whether or not he'll get penalty duties at Godset, I don't know. But he has scored from the spot quite a few times. His time at Metz was a bit of a mystery, like I said. He joined there with high hopes, and I think he was maybe a bit too young, a bit too lightweight for the league. And I mentioned before his lack of finishing let him down. Well, in the French league, you've got to be clinical, haven't you? Because there's not many chances. You've got to make the most of them when they come. I think in these leagues like Latvia, Norway, there's going to be more opportunity for him to score. So he can afford a few misses, can't he? The goalkeepers aren't as good. The defenders make more mistakes. So you don't have to have that clinical edge as much. So that's where it went wrong for him in France. But I think he could be a very good signing for Godset in Norway there. And a good player to keep an eye on, like I say.
Okay, fantastic. That is Janis Ikaunieks. Thanks for the question, Vegard. Really appreciate it. And we're going to move on to the next one. Just to finalise it, it's a free transfer as well. He's on a contract until 2022 at Stroms Godset. So keep an eye out for him, Janis Ikaunieks.
So we also had a suggestion from someone called Pat Scout, who's very interested in a new player at Helsingborg that you're going to talk about now. Now, you're going to mention him for a few minutes on this episode, but you've also done an in-depth video analysis on this player, which you can talk about in a minute, Jonathan. But it's a new Helsingborg player. Take it away.
Yeah, I think it's at FC Peaky Blinder. Thanks a lot for the question. He's asked us about a Dutch player who Helsingborg have signed by the name of Anthony van den Hurk. And it is, in fact, the honour, Anthony van den Hurk has the honour of being the very first video blog analysis I will be doing on a new show on Just Football, and hopefully we'll post it on the Nordic Football podcast account if we can as well. But to watch the full analysis, go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/JF Analytics, bit.ly/JF Analytics. That will take you to a video which we are going to post of Anthony van den Hurk, a complete and comprehensive full analysis of Helsingborg's new signing. So what I'll do for now is just a couple of minutes. I'll briefly talk you through him for those who maybe are unable to watch that video. This is a player that Helsingborg fans certainly will be excited about. They signed him, in fact, in February, and the intention was he would stay at the club. His former club, he's been playing in the Dutch second division for most of his career, former PSV youth graduate. The aim was for him to stay there for most of his the season, finish the season in the Netherlands, and then move to Sweden. But obviously, with the COVID-19 crisis, they had a buyout clause, Helsingborg, and they bought out his contract from MVV Maastricht and have signed him permanently. So he's now available to play from whenever the league is free to resume. What kind of player is Anthony van den Hurk? Well, as I say, if you head to the analysis, you'll see a full, proper, in-depth video report in all aspects of his game. But just briefly, he's a striker. He scored 17 goals last season for MVV Maastricht, which is a really good ratio. Scored 45% of the team's goals. So that tells you a lot that you need to know about them. Mid-table club, Maastricht last season. And he's a penalty box striker. Doesn't get too much involved in the build-up play in terms of all-round game. He's more of a target man. He occupies those general target man duties. But he's strong. He's got good physique. He's a cute finisher in the box. Good heading, timing of his runs. We looked at a lot of his games, his clips, and put together a really detailed analysis of him. So on that analysis, I give my verdict in terms of what he can bring, how many goals I expect him to score, exactly what he can offer Helsingborg. Compare him to some of the players in their squad, profile him against some of their other players and past players, and really go into depth on statistics, compare him to Rasmus Jonsson, compare him to other players as well, who he models against. But yeah, van den Hurk is definitely a player to look out for this season, and I think Helsingborg fans can potentially be fairly excited.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you one question, a quick question about him. I've been looking at his history at clubs. Now, he's 27 years old. He's never actually played in a top flight of any country, of a division in any country. This will be the first time. Now, do you have a concern about that at 27 years old, that he can make that step up to a top flight league? I mean, how do you compare the Dutch second division to the Allsvenskan?
Well, it's a really good question, and one I've been struggling to find an answer for. And maybe there's a gap in the market there, because I did look to try and find a direct comparison between Allsvenskan and Dutch Eerste Divisie, Keukenkampioen-divisie, and it's really hard to find any kind of direct comparison. You go on UEFA site, coefficients, that kind of thing. You can't really get a league by league comparison. The best really way to do it is probably Football Manager. But the one thing for sure is there is a big step up, I think, between the Dutch second division and the Allsvenskan. I've looked into the quality of the leagues. I've modelled it very, very closely on how I believe he'd fit in the video. And I do think it will be a step up. He's mentioned it as well. He said that the intensity of the game, he's already been training. He's given a few interviews, and he said the intensity in training is a lot higher than he's used to. So he will have to step up. But I think physically he can do that. And I think one thing you learn on the analysis is that, he's got a very good track record goals-wise, and his background as well. Played with Memphis Depay at PSV as a youth player. So maybe he is ready for that step up. And I think at 27 years old, this is the time for him now, really, isn't it? He really needs to kickstart his career. He's got a good goal ratio. So he is pretty much ready probably for that step up. That will be a big challenge for him. But all in all, like I say, head to bit.ly/JF Analytics, a new video blog that we'll be doing and bringing to you. And you'll get the full picture there. But yeah, like I say, I think it is a promising signing for Helsingborg. And you can watch the full analysis for free on that channel.
There you go. Looking forward to seeing that analysis, Jonathan. So, well, without further ado, we're going to move into the main course of this episode, which is an interview with Örebro manager Axel Kjäll. So let's take it away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and we are here today to be joined by another special guest. We've had him on the show before, so it's a welcome back, and I'm pleased to say that we are joined by the Örebro manager Axel Kjäll. Axel, how are you getting on there?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm fine, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it, and of course hope you're well in in Sweden, and thank you for joining us, for your time. I mean, I guess that is the first question really for you is, you know, you've been on the show before, and the last time we spoke to you, I think you'd been in charge for just under a year. It was back in 2018, so now you've nearly been at Örebro for roughly around 3 years now. So, you know, how have you been? How's everything been in the last couple of years since we last talked to you?
Yeah, it's been okay. It's been, of course, as in football, it's been ups and it's been downs. For me, it's been a slightly change in my role. I mean, when we spoke last time, I was more of the head coach, and then the structure of the club was that we had a head coach, and then we had a sports director, and then we had the CEO. For almost a little bit more than a year ago, the club decided to change the structure a bit. So from now on, we have the CEO, and then I am more of a manager. So I have got some more responsibility when it comes to building the squad and development of the sports side of the club. So that's been very interesting and fun for me to have that experience, especially the last year.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like maybe more responsibilities to a certain extent. How have you dealt with that? You know, what's changed? I mean, that sounds like it's maybe like a bit like the English model, if you know what I mean, a traditional English manager like the Sir Alex Ferguson or Arsene Wenger type model of the manager in charge of a lot of the aspects of the club. Is that correct? And if so, tell us what that has involved on a day-to-day basis. What are you doing more now of? Or maybe, you know, what are you more involved with now than before?
Yeah, but you can say that like from before, it's been like the head coach has the main responsibility of the short-term development. We should focus more on maybe every game or week to week or month to month, and then you have the sport director. They have to have a little bit vision about maybe for longer time and more from year to year. So of course things have changed a bit for me, and that has been the biggest thing. It's been mainly 2 or 3 things you can say. First of all, it's of course more of building the squad. Like a head coach, you're involved, but you don't have the full responsibility. Now it's been for me to build a squad, recruitment of players, try to sell players, more dealing with agents, more working with the structure of the club in terms of how the squad should look for the next 2-3 years. Also more responsibility when it comes to responsibility of the co-workers that I have, the personnel that works closest to me. And also it comes down to negotiations with the players that we want to sign, negotiations with players that we want to renew the contracts with. So
you're direct.
New side, yeah. So I do pretty much. I wouldn't say everything, but I do a lot more in terms of recruiting players. Sure. It comes more for me to try to delegate things to the other coaches also. What's also happened in January that my assistant coach Daniel Bäckström was signed by Malmö. So since the end of January we have a new assistant coach. His name is Vitor Gasimba. It's from Portugal, but has been working in Norway for the last 6 years, I think.
Okay, so does that mean you are literally involved with, say, negotiating for players' contracts as well as everything else in management? So do you deal with the actual acquisition of the players, you know, negotiating contracts, etc.?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Mainly with the players' agents, but yeah.
So
that's been a new part of me, and that's been a lot for me to learn. I'm very grateful that we have a great CEO that have helped me, especially in the beginning. But we work tight together, me and him, and then we have one guy from the board that has a little bit more responsibility for the football. So we 3 form a group of that we try to work together in those things. But I am the guy who is making the negotiations.
That's fantastic. I mean, we'll come back to that in a second, because there are some questions I want to ask you about transfers and that kind of thing in the past year or so. So I will definitely revisit that question. I think the first place to go from here, though, is clearly the situation in Sweden. You know, as we know, there's a crisis around the world, the pandemic, and every nation has dealt with it in a different way. It's a crazy situation all around the world. Can you tell us the latest in Sweden, and when will the games return? We've been given different dates, different reports we've seen from the Allsvenskan, potentially June. What is the latest on that, and what can you tell us in terms of football maybe returning, and also how it's been in the last sort of 6, 7, 8 weeks for you guys over there?
Yeah, like you say, in the whole community and also, of course, in the football world, the last 2 months, more or less, have been very, very strange. Sweden as a country is, I think, if you compare it to countries in the world and in Europe, it's been one of the countries that they choose the line of not go to lockdown. The schools, the stores have been opened. Children go to daycare. We also, as a football team, as a football club, we have continued to train. There have been restrictions in terms of that, of course, if you feel a little bit sick, a little bit extra, then you stay at home. Of course, we have done some different things that, for example, we train with the team, but we don't have any meetings inside. The players, they change in different locker rooms, so they change 4 and 4, 5 and 5 in the stadium. And the main thing is that we don't play any games. We're not allowed to play friendlies, and the Allsvenskan has been postponed. But probably what we hope for is that what the federation and also what we think is in the middle of June. But that is what 14th, 15th of June. That is what we're working for. But it also, we haven't got that confirmed from the government, and still what the signs that the federation and the league association gets from the government is that we don't know now. You have to wait. So the situation has been very, very unsure, unsecure, you could say. So what we have done, we have been first of all, we took 2 weeks off, and then we came back, and now we train. We try to of course work on our game model as much as possible. We take this, we try to take it as something positive, that we can go into extra details in attacking, defending and transition. We try to have these trainings at least once, sometimes twice a week. We try to play a lot 11 versus 11. But of course you miss that little bit extra when it comes to games, because the work as a coach and the work as a player, especially in season, is that you prepare for the game, you play the game, you evaluate the game, and then you go on for the next game, and that's how you try to improve week to week.
Yeah,
that's how you try to win the next game. So of course that have been a challenge for us as a coaching staff, and also for me as a boss, for both the coaches and the players, to make them feel that this period is still important, that we don't, even though we don't have any games.
Yeah,
so
I think that's
a challenge, of course.
That's what very interesting. I think that's one of the questions I have for you. What's it been like as a manager to sort of keep players motivated, keep them fit after so long without any games? Obviously, in Sweden there was a long pre-season as well, wasn't there? So we're coming up to the league ended last November, didn't it? So we're talking sort of 6-7 months now. Yeah. How has it been keeping them motivated, and what have you done to keep them alert? Can you give us maybe examples as well? Do you set them sort of homework? You mentioned there that you're still keeping the training, you're still keeping the tactical sessions, that kind of thing. What other things have you done to keep the players motivated, alert, and how difficult has that been for you?
I mean, first of all, I think it's important this different times and this what have happened in the world. I think even though we're a team sport, you have to understand that different people, they take it differently. We have, for example, Kevin Wright, that is born and raised in London. Of course, you have to understand that he thinks it's very strange that we can continue to train. He speaks with his family, he speaks with his friends back in London, and see that everything is in lockdown.
Sure.
We have players from Denmark, we have players from Brazil. Of course, they think that they do like this in my country, and from here we go on as not so many changes. So that has been number one, to understand that people handle this differently. I mean, we can also have a player that maybe he have someone in the family that have the corona, and then of course he feels a little bit insecure about himself. So that has been number one. Be there for the players, speak with the players, be seeing them more as persons that maybe than footballers, first of all, and then second of all, when it comes to football, we have trying to put a lot as possible with competition within the trainings. One thing is that we have this competition week to week. We get points if you win the games. We try to have competition every day about who will bring in the equipment. We try to as much as possible make them feel that every training is important, and also we try to speak to them in terms of that this will be very useful for us when Allsvenskan starts. We need to make this first line of pressure be as good as possible, because when Allsvenskan starts, what we think, because like you said, the league have not started yet in Sweden, so we have something in front of us. We're not like the almost rest of Europe, they're in the middle of something. So we think that when we start, the league will be much more games in less time, which means there will be less time to train. So that means that we have to be even more prepared, both physically but also tactically, when the series starts. So that's how I try to motivate them from day to day.
I mean, it seems like the situation out there is quite strange in the sense, like you say, Sweden has that model where there is a kind of summer break usually, a long break for the summer, with the transfer window reopening. And that is, I can imagine that's difficult. In terms of coaching development for yourself on a personal level, what have you been doing yourself to, deal with this period as a manager? Have you had to learn or adapt anything, for example, in your sessions? And also, when, we mentioned there that you've been in the role now nearly 3 years since we last spoke, obviously. In terms of your development as a coach specifically, what have you done to develop yourself as a coach in those kind of years? I remember when we spoke last time, you said that you were very big on self-development and self-improvement. So I'm interested to know how have you got kind of develop yourself in that time? Do you, for example, have time to visit other clubs and get advice? You're still a very young manager. You're in your 30s. What have you been doing to develop yourself? Have you, are there any books, for example, you'd recommend if a coach was listening, for example? What would you advise to them if they want to develop themselves like you have and become a manager in such a high level?
No, but that's a good question. First of all, if it's something that has been slightly positive with this corona, is that you have some times, and I have used this time for self-reflection a bit, and also, of course, trying to study, watch other teams when they play, try to read some things on the internet. But I also been working for the past 5 or 6 years. I've been working with a company that's based in Barcelona that is called Soccer Service. So now has also been the time for me I have been there doing some classes, but there also been some extra for me that doing some classes over the internet with them. Things that you don't have so much time to do when you're in the middle of the season. So that has been good for my self-development. If we look back to the last 3 years, as you said, I've been pretty lucky, because somewhere along the way, year by year, I don't know if you can say I would take another step, but I have got some new things in my role. For example, for me, it was a huge step going for just being the head coach and being becoming a manager.
Yeah.
So then it's been for me, I would say for the last year, what I've been learning most, I would say, is all of those things that I didn't know from before. So I have been forced to learn, because it's been new expectations on me in my new role. So along the way, I have been learning a lot, and I think that is, like I said, I've been lucky now. I think it's the best way to learn, that you have to learn along the way. So that has been very, very good for my development when it comes to how you handle agents, how you work with your good negotiations, how you work with your scouting network, how you also are more responsibility for the personnel that they have close to you. How do you, for example, now I'm responsible with the kit man, I am responsible with the physio, I have the responsibility of working together with the media department a little bit. Things that also now we have a new administrator that I am responsible of. So that had also been very useful. And I think the third thing that has developed me, that was during the whole of January, we worked very, very hard on recruitment of a new assistant coach. That's been what we worked on for almost 4 or 5 weeks. When my former assistant coach got recruited by Malmö, one of the biggest, that was it, with the biggest team in Sweden, and now we start working with a new assistant that come with new influences, and also for me as a head coach, how do you involve him as much as possible in the way we want to work, and also but without keeping the identity that we have built from the last years. So that, I think, like I said, the last years have been very development.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have developed a lot.
I can imagine, yeah. I mean, is that something you can learn? Is there classes to teach you, how to like you said, how to negotiate, how to deal with the kit man, how to deal with agents? Is that something you can learn, or is it just experience?
Yeah, I think experience, but then of course you try to read, you try to speak to people you try to use your network. For example, the first thing I did when I got the question if I wanted to become a manager of the club was to make 4 or 5 phone calls to different people in Scandinavia that I've been known from before, and speak to them a little bit, that have that role, or maybe some coaches they had that role from before. And then along the way, if it's something that you don't know, then you have to think, okay, how can I learn from this?
Yeah.
Where can I get the information? And that has been some challenging times, but also something that I think will be useful in my career.
Definitely.
If it is more as a head coach or if it's the manager, that we will see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can only be good for your development for sure, especially when you're, as I mentioned, you're not yet even 40. So, as a young manager, I think that could really stand you in good stead. And who knows, in England, that's kind of the model. So you never know, that could maybe ease your pathway over here maybe one day. I want to ask you about the season that's just gone. Because I'll be honest with you, we had a season preview last year, and in our pre-season predictions, we thought Örebro might struggle. I'm not going to lie, there's no point hiding. We thought you'd be maybe towards the lower end of the table. The reason for that was because obviously you lost key players such as Kennedy Ikaunieks, Nahir Basara, who were some of the top players really in the league to a certain extent. Certainly Basara had a lot of player interest and had a really great season. But you ended up finishing 9th. Did pretty well, to be honest, I'd say. Tell us, about that last season, how it went, and what were your expectations going into it, and how as it developed, how did you go? Örebro had a sort of maybe a slow start, 2 defeats to begin the season, but you kind of picked it up, especially in the summer period. Tell us about the season in general. Obviously, it was your, I think, 3rd full season in management as well. So tell us about that season just gone and your expectations and how it developed.
Yeah, as you say, it was challenging. We lost some very good players. We tried to replace them. I would say that this was, on the other hand, one of my best seasons as head coach, but on the other hand, maybe the worst season as a head coach. And what I mean by that is that during this season, we struggled a lot with injuries. We had very much injuries. Both injuries that we suffered that was for a long time, but also injuries that were 1 game, 2 game, then they were back and then they got injured again. And for me, I think injuries is not just unluck; it's the head coach main responsibility to try to keep the players fit and keep them on the pitch. That is his job. Then of course he needs to have a good staff around him. But we struggled with, and that I was very, very disappointed by myself that we couldn't keep the players on the pitch, and with that we couldn't keep playing with our first 11 more games together. But I'm also very proud of, even though those tough times, as you said, we had to change from game to game a lot, and I'm very proud of my job as a head coach during these times to even though we had tough get the results, and also when it comes to coaching to get the players build relations in a short amount of time. In terms of that, I think we had good tactical training. We did some good scouting of the opponents, and so that's also, like I say, a pretty stable 9th place. But if we should be a team that goes for for, I would say, the top 6 or something like that. That for now in Sweden is very tough. Then we need to have a season that we don't have so much injuries. And also, if you look to the season, I would say that you could look at it. It was mainly 3 parts of the season. Like you said, the first part, it was tough. We had a tough start. We didn't get so many points. We had a lot of injuries there. We had some players that was in and out a lot. Then came the summer, and I'd say the summer was the best part for us. But then we also played, I think it was 4 or 5 games in a row with almost the same starting 11. And that 11 we can build a lot on, and then it was also the best player were available. They could work together for a long time. And that developed us a lot. And then come the last part of the season where, we played against the best team that was going for the gold. And what we also took the decision, me as a manager, and I think one of the reasons why I took this decision was that I was a manager, not a head coach, that we played a lot of the young players. We had, I think it was 4 or 5 players that they were making the debuts in Allsvenskan against really, really strong teams. So that was the last 5-6 games was more or less looking for the future, giving these players experience. And then we also suffered some tough results in the end of the season. So 3 parts of the season, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Carlos Strandberg maybe had quite a big impact as well on loan, and he picked up some form around that sort of time and helped score some goals that you needed as well. I mean, you mentioned there that you've got you developed a young squad, which is probably bodes you well for the future, I imagine. You've also been quite tactically versatile since you joined. I remember talking about tactics with you on the last podcast, so we can always put a link to that if anyone wants to listen back to it. We had a good discussion about pressing traps, that kind of thing. You've kind of experimented with your system in the sense of playing a back 3 at times, sometimes a back 5. You've been quite tactically versatile. Do you have a set style, would you say, now that you've developed, or would you say, given your background as an opposition scout, that you like to, adapt your tactics based on the opponents kind of thing, or based on the availability of your players? Where do you sit on that debate? Because, there's some managers who are very rigid. This is our shape, this is our style, this is how we play. Some are like to vary it depending on who they're against. What would you say about yourself from that point of view, now you've had more time in the job?
I would say that I learned a lot last year, and I think last year, when you have injuries, players going in and out, then it's a little bit more difficult, I think, to be tactical, to be flexible, to be more technically flexible, because then it comes both the new system and the new relations. So what we had during the summer, when we played with the same players for more games, then it's easier to change the system, because then the players know each other, and then it's just changing the system. So that also made us maybe stick a little bit more to the formation that we had. But I would say, if we look for the future, I think where I am now, and this will be interesting to see in the next 3 or 5 years, where I am now, I will always have the base, but I will also be flexible depending on the opponents. I think that's the chance for us as a middle club in Sweden to have those games where you play against better opponents, is to have a very good match plan that is not like, okay, we always do this and then we continue to do it no matter who we play. Then I think, of course, that will be successful if we play against teams that over time are worse than us. I think Malmö, for instance, that if they play because they have the best players in Sweden, if they put the system into place and do it very, very well, then I think they will have success. But for us, I think we have to understand that we will have to change a little bit depending on the opponents, the quality of the opponents, the system of the opponents. So that, I think, also will be for this year. What we will do this year, that will be the biggest change. What we have trained on and get some extra time now is we go for a back 3, we'll go to a back 4, and that will be interesting how we can manage this. It's been new for the players, and it's been interesting to see during the season if that will help us to perform even better this year.
Is that like a 4-4-2 type formation, or a 4-3-3, or are you experimenting different shapes?
What we will do is that the back 4 will be there, but then the 3, we will play mainly with the 3 players in the center, and that we will be flexible if you play with a 4-3-3, if it will be a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1. So you can say the 3 players in the middle, they can change both from game to game, but also in the games.
Yeah.
That will give us different possibilities. But the main core will be the back 4 and 3 players centrally, and then we will see how we form those 3, and also where we put the wingers, if we decide to put the wingers a little bit more inside or a little bit wider. So yeah, we will see. But it's also interesting and developing for me as a coach to change, especially go to this back 4, where it was my core before when I was assistant coach and my first year as head coach.
Yeah.
Then we have 2.5 seasons now with mainly back 5 or back 3. So it will be interesting and see how we can manage this year to change.
For sure, and it's always good to, develop, isn't it, and experiment with new styles, teach your players new things. I mean, one of the areas that we will talk about is how to develop players. That's something I'm interested in because you've had a very good player last season, Jake Larsson, who has attracted a lot of interest, in fact, from big clubs, from what I understand. I guess as the manager, you must be dealing with that situation yourself day to day as well. Tell us about his development and on a wider, widening out. What's your philosophy for developing players? Are you a manager that likes to work with young players? And if you're working with a young player as a manager, what do you look to develop them? What are the key, what are the key things to developing young players?
Yeah, I would say that the club, one of the things when I got in as manager, what they said to me, that for us as a club to take the next step, and what I totally agree on is to increase the economy of the club. And you can increase the economy in the club in different ways, but the 2 quickest ways is one, if you go to Europe. And if you go to Europe and you go to Europa League or Champions League, then you get a lot of money from that. And the other thing is to sell players. And to sell players, you have to develop players, because we are not the club that can buy expensive and then sell expensive. We are the type of team that get players maybe a little bit cheaper, can have good development and then release them for more money. So then it comes down to the next level, which players are attractive for the clubs. That will be mainly young players that have the potential.
Sure.
And then if you zoom in a little bit to Jake Larsson, was a player that was in the academy of Hammarby. They didn't promote him to the first team. He's born and raised in this town. He was with us for 1 week for trial in the winter, and then for me, when I saw him, he had especially 2 things that made him very, very interesting for us. One was the pace. His way of going for the goal, always he saw the goal. And the second thing was his ambition. When I spoke to him, where he said, looking to my eyes, and said that I want to be one of the best players in Sweden. I'm ready to work very, very hard for it. So that made him interesting, and then we signed him. And then he came in, he performed well, he scored a couple of goals, I think in the end of it was in April and May. Then came the summer, and then the summer when the team was strong, he was also very, very strong. He did some very, very good games. Then I think for the last 10 games, then he had a little bit tougher. But also during the summer, it was a lot of speculation with him, a lot of rumors. And it's also something that is tough for young people to handle. And all of a sudden, the expectations from himself and from people around him grows a lot. But he's a very interesting player that also made his debut for the national team under 21 in Sweden. And I think that with his ambition, also what I'm very happy is that we could sign a new contract with him. So he extended his contract 2 more years. So that's a guy that I think if he continue to develop as he has been doing, he will probably this season leave for a bigger club.
Yeah. There's been rumours with Inter Milan, for example. I don't know. Can you confirm that, or is it links to Italy? Is that true, or are you able to say anything about that?
It's been a lot of interest from Italy, especially. I cannot confirm that it's been a bid from such a big club as Inter, but it's been some interesting from clubs from the Serie A. And then, of course, it comes down to when he performs well in the national team and when he continues to perform well here, then we will see what's happening.
Yeah.
But he's also a guy, he's a local, he's from the town, and he's also very, very important for the club and the ambition that the club has. So it will be interesting to, like I said, to follow him. And when it comes to development of players, I think number one, the most important thing in the way that I want to work with players is the players that is dedicated to what they do. I mean, you can have the talent and you can be the guy that have the talent, but you're not ready to work so hard for it, and then I think you can manage in a few years. But then if you don't have like the ambition, I have to see in their eyes that when they say I want to become the best I ever, the version of myself, I want to become one of the best players in Sweden, and then when they go out on the pitch and every day show it, then I'm ready to try to give them the tools in terms of working extra after trainings, tools in giving them extra feedback, but also I think the most important tools that you can get as a young player, the chance to play really competitive games.
Yeah.
That you get the chance to play on the highest level, and that you get the chance to play, and even if you don't perform 100%, then you get the chance again. So I think we have maybe together with Jake Larsson, we have 1, 2, maybe 3 players that will be very interesting to see this year.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it will be interesting to watch Örebro with that young talent that they have. Definitely. I mean, let's talk about the transfer market, and you know, you've just mentioned your new role there to a certain extent in terms of dealing with negotiations and things. One thing we've noticed with Örebro in recent seasons is, I mean, although you have Kevin Wright as a good example, he's an English player, and I wonder if you have ever thought about looking more at English players. But one thing I've noticed about the recruitment is quite often you've taken players from the Swedish market, maybe like you say, Jake came from Hammarby's academy. There's been other players, you know, perhaps from Degerfors, and I'm trying to think of examples that you've signed off the top of my head. But there are many examples of players that you've recruited from maybe lower leagues of Sweden and that kind of thing. What do you look for in your recruitment, and do you work together with your scouts, I imagine? Is it kind of like a philosophy to recruit from Sweden, or is it choice, or you know, what are the factors when you look to recruit now that you're more in charge of that side of things?
Yeah, we took the decision also to focus mainly on the Scandinavian market, and the reason for that is mainly two. One, that I think that's a market that we can handle. I mean, we're not the biggest club. We don't have a lot of scouts. We have, of course, a scouting department, but it's not so big. That is number one. And number two, if we recruit players from Sweden or from Scandinavia, we also see the chance for them to what do you say? They can come into the club quick. They can come into the league quick. Come into the country quick, and that we see is good. So what we mainly do, we work with I would say 3 types of transfers. We look at these 3 categories, you could say. Number one is the top players. If it's players that play in other Allsvenskan leagues, if it's players that we see, they go in and they will be a starting player for sure. They will improve the team. They will straight away be one of the best players in the team. If that player can be a guy that's from Örebro or from close to Örebro, from the country, then we were happy with that. But that's one part we work on. The second is that we look at lower leagues in Sweden. Superettan. We want to be very good in Superettan, recruit the best players from Superettan. This year we signed 3 players from Superettan, and I would say that we signed the top goal scorer. We signed one of the best offensive midfielders, and for me, we signed by far the best left back. So there we also want to be strong. We also want in that part is the second part is that also players from Division 1 in Sweden that we think have, and they should have the potential to the first year. They should compete for a position in the starting 11, and the ambition should be that at least the second year, then there will be a starting player. And then we have the third part that we mainly look at young player from our own academy. We look for young players that plays in other top academies. And for instance, what we did last summer was that we recruited the under 17 national team right back from Malmö. And for us, recruiting a player from Malmö, from their academy, it's big. But what also happens we have, I think that the best teams in Sweden, Malmö, AIK, Djurgården, Hammarby, those teams, they have very, very good academies. They put a lot of money into the academies, and they have very good academies. They work very, very well. But they are also the toughest teams to get into as a youngster. I mean, for example, Malmö, they have such a good squad. They have such experienced players, and they also in every group in different age they have national team players. For instance, the players that are born 2002, I think they have 8 or 9 national team players. And so it's very, very tough also within that group. So there we see a chance that we can recruit players from these teams that can come to us and get a contract with the first team. And the third thing that we look at is national team players in the youth. If it's national team players that maybe have not gone to a big club yet.
Yeah.
So these 3 parts, that's what we're mainly trying to focus our recruitment on.
I mean, one example of that is a couple of players I want to ask you about now. I mean, just to tell the listeners, I mean, you've signed Isaac Boy, Simon Gustafsson, a couple of others, the ones that you just mentioned from the from Ljungskile, BK Ford, as your rivals this season, I think. One thing I wanted to ask you is about one of the big players that you have signed is Jack Lane, who's come from Oikor. Obviously, he went to France with Amiens. He's a player that we talked about a lot in the past years. Back when I was in Sweden, I saw him a lot in youth football when he was at Brommapojkarna. Tell us about him, because, I mean, I suppose it's quite sad in a way because his loan, I think, is only till the summer, right? So if the games don't resume, then there's possibly a chance he might not play. Is there any discussions about extending it, or what's the situation with him? But tell us about him as a player, and his potential.
Yeah, but if we look at the different categories that we spoke about, the different parts, now 1, 2, 3, here's a player that we think can improve us as a team. And then if we find players that is available on loan that we think can improve us as a team, then we also look for that. So Jack was a name that came up. I think that we had last year we had a big success where we loaned Carlos Strandberg from Malmö, and then he scored a lot of goals, and then he went to Saudi Arabia. So I think also players. Other clubs see that the place Örebro is. It's a pretty calm town, but I think with good coaches and a good chance for development, then I think Örebro is interesting for those who maybe need to take a new step in the career. And then Jack is a guy that, like I said, very, very young. He came forward in Swedish football. He did great success in Brommapojkarna. He was alone on AIK, and then he had the tough situation in Amiens. Then we got the chance to have him here on loan. He's very, very fast. We see him as he can play as a 9. He can also play as a winger. He can be very useful in counter-attacking, but he is also very skillful in going in. And when we play against low defense, he can start from the side, go 1v1, and create goal-scoring opportunity for himself and for others. So that's a guy that we thought that if he gets to us, he will get a lot of games. Then we can also have a lot of benefit from him. Then, like I said, the situation has been very strange for him. He arrived, I think he was here for 3 days. Then we played in the cup against Elfsborg. He played for 87 minutes. And then after that, everything was cancelled. So he came here to play more games.
Yeah.
Now we have not played any games at all. And also during this period, his club that he belongs to, Amiens, got relegated from the first division in France.
Yeah.
So we will see in the next couple of weeks, I think, what will happen, because this happened last week with Amiens. I spoke a little bit with the club. Of course, I have to speak with Jack, and they also in France. They don't know exactly when the series starts again. So we will see. I feel sad for him. That of course I feel sad for everyone, but we will see. He's a great guy. He's a very, very good player, and we will see if he will get any official games for us or what will happen. That I don't know now.
Yeah, I mean, and how did you do with? There was a publicised report that he missed the game because he fell asleep and slept through his alarm. How was that dealing with that for you as a manager? Was it just one of those things?
Of course. I think it's very important in a football club. You have your rules. You have times. It's very, very important as a football player. It's important in different jobs, but that's important. But you also have to understand that things can happen. And people can make mistakes, and as long as you learn from your mistakes, then I think then it's fine. If you do the same mistake over and over again and you don't pay attention to it, then it's a totally different case. But I spoke to him, and he was very sad. He understands what he did wrong, but he's also a young guy, and also one part of me as a coach, and it's further development is of course to make him understand the importance of these things cannot happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I can say.
Yeah, for those who don't know him, he's an 18-year-old player, still very young, and definitely one worth watching if we do get the chance to resume the season. If he stays at Örebro, I hope he does, to be honest, because that would be. We had him down as one of the players to watch. Another one I want to ask you about is there's been a lot of rumours about Jiloan Hamad. Some publicised reports that he may be joining the club. Obviously, he was at Hammarby, big player. Is that something that's confirmed, or is that something that's just rumours? Can you comment on that?
No, but I would say Jiloan, for those who don't know him, he is born in his first club was in Örebro.
Yeah.
He's a guy that's been grown up in Örebro when he was in Sweden before he left for Malmö, and then he went for Deutschland, from Germany, and then he went to come back. He is a guy that I've been known for 10, 15 years because I was also a player and the head coach in his former club here in Örebro. It's called BK Forward. And the guy that when he is in town, I try to meet him. We speak. Sometimes he trains with the team when he has been in between two clubs. And he is one of the players that I would really love to work with in the future. Then when it fits him, that we'll see, and when it fits the club. But I hope that sometime in the future he will come and play for Örebro, and I also know he is very positive to that because it's his hometown, and I think that as a football player you always want to try to have a few years in your hometown. Then we will see. He is in Croatia now. He is doing well, but of course I have my hopes that he will join.
Yeah, he's a very good player, and it'd be interesting if he does come back to Sweden, and certainly a boost potentially. A couple of final questions before we let you go. Appreciate your time, as I say. Really good to talk to you and get your insights. One of the things we read recently about the CEO, Simon Astrom, and obviously this is a wider question for Swedish football. He mentioned that the club is in a difficult situation financially, obviously due to the coronavirus, the crisis. Like Sweden, I mean, it is a situation that's going to affect all clubs really, even around the world, even Premier League level, losses of revenue, that kind of thing. Can you tell us a bit more about the situation specific to Örebro? Will it mean that you need to maybe sell more players, or are you able to manage it? Has it been difficult conversations? What's the sort of short-term, medium-term look for Örebro as a club at the moment, with maybe the potential loss of revenue, that kind of thing? How are you being able to cope with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when this thing starts to happen, then of course, when we don't play any games, there is no income because we don't have any spectators. I think Örebro as a club has been, for those who don't know it, has been in Sweden mid-table club, both when it comes to points, but also when it comes to economy. I think for the last 2 years, we've been the team that have paid least for the amount of points that we got. So that is something that I think we're very proud of, that we can maximize the performance although our economic situation. So I think in terms of, we're a pretty stable club. We have the financials in place. But of course, for Swedish football and for Örebro, when Allsvenskan starts, if it will be no spectators, then of course it will be tough for us. Then if it will be for 5 games or 10 games or 15 games, that will of course affect. It also, if the Allsvenskan cannot start at all, if they will have to, it will not be in the middle of June, if it have to be July or August or September, I don't know. Then of course one of the biggest income for all the Swedish club is the TV money. And Swedish football, and of course us also, was very happy because for this year was the first year with a new TV company, Discovery, where we got much more money from that company. Then of course, if we don't have any games, then we don't have any games to show. Then if they start that we don't get any money from the TV company, then of course it will be tough. I'm very happy and pleased that we have a strong CEO as we have now. I also know that this club is so important for so many people. So I really hope and I think that the club will survive. But of course, I think we also have to, as in the rest of the world, if it's football, if you have finances, will be tough. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be very keen to see what happens next, and hopefully things can resume, especially like you say with the new TV deal, which does promise to bring in some extra finances for Sweden, which would be really good. Final question then before we let you go. You're on, as I understand it, you're on an outgoing contract at the moment. I think with 1 year left remaining, maybe on your deal, according to reports. Any thoughts about your own future? Has there been talks about a new contract? Are you settled at the moment? And what is the outlook for the season ahead? What are your ambitions with Örebro? How do you look at the season when it does eventually start again? How are you looking at things? With your targets, do you have any clear targets in mind?
No, but like I said, if we start with myself, I'm very proud, and I like very much working in the town where I am born, in the team that I started to play when I was 5 years old. So of course, having such a big role in this club, I'm very proud of, and I think the development for me and also for the players in the club is pretty stable. So, but I also know that I'm very lucky that I've been working at the same place for so long time, and I also know that the results they have to be good, otherwise it's the chance that you will get replaced. But I feel very comfortable, and I feel big trust from the board, and then we'll see what will happen maybe in the summer and or maybe even in the end of the season. That we will see. But I know that the club is very happy with me at the point that we are right now, and I also think that, of course, as a club, you always need to evaluate the head coach, and if he works the way that you want the club to, in the direction as the club wants. So that we will see. Yeah. The expectations for the team, I think, as you said, what we have been doing for the last couple of years, we have become ninth. I think we were 11th, and then we've become ninth. I think we have the ambition, of course, to get closer to the top teams. That must be our ambition. What I think is very important for us is that we have a season where we have less injuries. And I also, what I have been said to the players, that this season will be unlike any other seasons because of the preparations, the amount of games we will play, and the amount of time. But we can be the team that is most prepared of all teams when Allsvenskan starts if we do good things. It's the same for every club. So that I hope could give us something positive. And the last thing I hope is that we can develop some players. It would be very nice for us to these young players that we try to get in, to have good development of them, and see if we maybe can also sell a player. Even though you know that the transfer market, what will happen with the transfer market in Sweden, in Scandinavia, in Europe, in the world the next year, no one knows.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a strange one. I wrote an article recently saying that I can imagine it might be even an open transfer window, instead of the usual transfer windows in England, certainly, because the market's going to be very strange, isn't it, I suppose, going forward. But it's great to hear your thoughts on how things will go. It's probably a bit too early to give predictions for who's going to win the league and that kind of thing. There's a lot to go before we know that when the league's going to restart. So I won't ask you for that, because I remember last time you predicted AIK to win the league. So you were completely right, by the way. So you obviously know your stuff. It's fantastic to speak to you again, Axel. Really good insights. I think you've got a great future in the game. So thanks for your time, and thanks for talking to the Nordic Football Podcast.
Thank you.
What an absolutely fantastic interview there. I really enjoyed listening to that. Incredibly insightful into the life of a top-flight Allsvenskan boss, and I'm sure the listeners are going to really enjoy it. That wraps things up for this episode. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at NordicFootPod. Follow us on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button. Like the videos. Check out Just Football's YouTube channel as well with the analysis video that we mentioned previously. But apart from that, wishing all the listeners the very best of health. Stay safe out there. And we'll catch you all again very soon, hopefully. So, goodbye.